All right, we're awaiting the start of a news conference from law enforcement in Austin on the serial bombings there. And when that happens, we're going to go right to it. But first, Washington's real March Madness. That's the focus of tonight's angle. All right, when most of you hear terms such as omnibus spending bill, no doubt your eyes glaze over. I get it. Well, an omnibus spending bill is, this is what you have to know, a legislative scam, because it involves packaging a lot of the federal government's smaller spending bills into one gargantuan bill. Then the whole thing can be passed with only a single vote in both the House and the Senate. That's nifty. So long gone are the days of the so-called regular order, when appropriations were done the sensible way, department by department, a lot more transparent that way, with each bill being considered separately. So under that scenario, Congress and the voters who elected them have more opportunity, you see, to strip out the waste and fund only essential priorities. Makes sense, right? Well, for years, we've heard leaders in both parties pledge to return to regular order, yet nothing ever happens. And it's back to these mind-numbing continuing resolutions, omnibus nightmares, and government shutdown threats. And the result is usually a last-minute budget-busting cram-down. Well, and sure enough, as spring kicks off, here they go again. And it's really ugly. Democrats are still in the minority. They're blaming the GOP poison pill provisions for delaying any omnibus bipartisan deal. And mind you, what Democrats call a poison pill, most Republicans call essential for law and order.
But they insist on poison pills and the rest. Hopefully they'll get serious and we can get this done before the 23rd of March.
The budget had to be finished. They wanted to add 160, 170 poison pill amendments, none of which would ever survive a vote on their own on the floor.
Democrats and Republicans have worked together to reject many of the poison pill riders from President Trump.
I want to take a poison pill after watching this. Well, meanwhile, conservatives are in revolt against the omnibus because they're free of all the old sequestration caps, and, big shocker, it increases spending.
This idea that all the bills come together in one big, what we call an omnibus, ominous might be a better word.
We're looking at $1 trillion+ dollar deficit perhaps as early as this October when the numbers come out. You know, that's under a Republican administration. We need to do better.
We've gotten into this bad habit of thinking that money up here is somehow free, right? It just falls from the heavens and money is free. It's not.
I love Dave Bratt. Well, this means Republicans will need, of course, Democratic votes to pass the measure through both chambers. And this means more add-ons, more giveaways, more junk funded for big donors and other special interest groups. It's a total mess. Do you remember what Trump promised? He promised to cut spending, to defund boondoggles, and yes, to drain the swamp.
We will immediately terminate President Obama's 2 illegal executive amnesties in which he defied federal law and the Constitution.
A Trump administration will cancel all federal funding to sanctuary cities. We will end illegal immigration, keep the drugs from pouring into our communities.
We're not going to allow and we're not going to fund as long as you have the abortion going on at Planned Parenthood.
But as of tonight, it looks like the stuff that should be defunded by the Republican majority, it won't be touched at all. Planned Parenthood, sanctuary cities, Obama's executive amnesty, and this is my favorite, almost $1 billion for a tunnel connecting New York and New Jersey. Oh, it's a disguised earmark for Chuck Schumer. Nice going, Chuck. And 2, of course, the most liberal states in America benefit. And that's the short list. Well, if passed as prologue, this Freddy Krueger-like omnibus bill will be thousands of pages long and include over $1 trillion in spending, maybe $1.3 trillion. And it'll pass with scant debate or scrutiny. My friends, this is just sheer madness. It's time to stand on principle without fear of a government shutdown. It's time to educate the public about how both parties got off course. And yeah, you have to compromise if necessary, but with full transparency. And if possible, not on the core issues. You are the majority after all. Start really helping President Trump drain the swamp. Don't add to it. You'll do the country good, and you just might surprise all the experts in November. And that's the angle. Joining me now for a reaction from Washington, D.C. is the Majority Whip of the House, Congressman Steve Scalise, a Republican who represents, of course, the great state of Louisiana. Congressman Scalise, it's great to see you. Now, I was a pretty harsh assessment by yours truly on the big, hulking omnibus spending bill. Your reaction to what I said?
Well, Laura, first, it's great to be back with you. And if you look at a number of the things that are President Trump's priorities, they're going to be in this bill. And you start with our nation's defense. The biggest piece of this bill by far is going to be the funding of our nation's defense, which actually restores the ability for our country to provide for our men and women in uniform and restore a lot of the damage that Barack Obama did. So we work closely with President Trump and Secretary Mattis to give him the tools that they need. Look, we saw 2 more planes fall out of the sky last week. We finally are restoring air superiority in this bill. We're giving our troops a pay raise in this bill. There are tremendous President Trump Republican priorities in this bill.
But, Congressman, I've got to get into here on the sequester caps, which I know were considered a very harsh measure. And when those sequester caps were in, they didn't decrease spending. They decreased the rate of increase in spending. That's crazy Washington speak. So the military did have some cutbacks, but the cutbacks were across the board. And the budget deficit under Obama, and for a few years, did begin to go down. So now Republicans are in charge, and it's like, well, the military needs another $300 billion, and this project needs a couple, $20 billion here and $30 billion there. And all of a sudden we turn around, and the Republicans are the party of big spending, Congressman. So how do we, as conservatives, hold up that mantle of fiscal responsibility if indeed we're blowing the budget again because we're going to spend more money in the military?
Well, and I think, again, one of our basic functions as a government is to fund and provide for our national defense. We shouldn't pit fiscal discipline against providing for our nation's defense.
Yeah, $700 billion.
They're not interoperable.
That's
so
a
you can
lot
do
of
both.
dough, right?
But look, we've
$700 billion?
Oh, it's a lot. But I mean, again, when you talk about restoring the cuts that Barack Obama made, this is not being done on the backs of, if you look at what's driving our debt, we all know what's driving our national debt, and that is mandatory spending. We've addressed that in the House, but also if you look at some of the problems in terms of what the CBO score says creating the $1 trillion deficits, they say our tax cut bill is what blew a $1 trillion deficit hole in our budget. I don't agree with that, Laura, because we're seeing economic growth. We're actually seeing not only companies giving bonuses and pay raise to workers, but we're seeing more people get out of the unemployment lines into the workforce. We're going to get more money in Washington because of the tax cut bill. So we're not going to have that $1 trillion deficit.
No, I have no doubt about that. But this is an opportunity, Congressman, to defund sanctuary cities and to get the real money for the wall that the president campaigned on, and he won the election on that wall. Defund Planned Parenthood. You heard that soundbite. $500 million. I know you agree with me on this, but $500 million to Planned Parenthood. The Republicans are in charge, and they punt it. That is mind-boggling.
Well, hold on a second. And look, I share your frustration there. But if you look at this bill, President Trump will have the ability to defund sanctuary cities in this bill. And I support the president in saying we're not only going to go after sanctuary cities, but sanctuary states. And there's a big fight going on, but I'm glad that President Trump said we're going to finally confront this. He has that ability. Funding of the wall, that's something we're negotiating in these final stages right now. That hasn't been completely released yet. But I think we're going to have the ability for the president to start building the wall in this bill. There are a number of other wins for the president that we have in this bill. But ultimately, if you want to talk about what's driving our debt, number one, I don't think tax cuts are going to blow a $1 trillion hole in the budget. And you're already seeing economic growth. I believe in free markets. Economic growth is actually happening. And we're going to ultimately have less than $1 trillion deficit. But we have got to save Medicare from bankruptcy. We've got to save Social Security from bankruptcy.
Congressman, we have to be honest with the American people. And you know I adore you. So I'm not trying to get on you here. But we have to be honest with the American people. Planned Parenthood will be fully funded in this bill, correct?
Not fully funded, but look, they've been getting funding for a long time. We're trying to roll that back. Our health care bill, which passed the House and failed in the Senate by one vote, would have fully defunded Planned Parenthood. So we got to continue that fight. I'm not done with that fight. I've worked very closely with all the pro-life groups, and none of us should give up on that fight, but we are going to be rolling back some of the money that they're getting. And we've got to continue battling on to get this done.
The sanctuary cities is such a winner politically for the country.
And the president will still be able to pursue that. This big gateway project that you were talking about, a big boondoggle. Hopefully, we're going to be able to defund that in this bill. So again, to take a look when the final ink is dried. A lot of these projects you're talking about, I agree with you completely on. And once this bill is done, I think you're going to still have that ability while restoring our nation's defense to the superiority it deserves and restoring a lot of the cuts that Barack Obama made to our military. President Trump wants this. President Trump wants this bill.
He was a disaster. Let's go to special counsel. Yeah. Both you now, you've joined Kevin McCarthy, other leaders in the House and the Senate, all believing it's time for a second special counsel to examine the Russian probe and the Hillary email probe, given what we've learned about the FBI. Why a second special counsel with endless budgets and almost no accountability? How is that the right answer?
Well, Laura, I think right now we don't have the accountability that we deserve, and we've seen serious questions raised from the House's investigation into what's going on with the special counsel. And it's not just the special counsel, it goes far beyond that. And so you see abuses potentially of the FISA process, which is a really important process. But if FBI agents were abusing that, and I think mostly this is coming from some of the top level FBI agents going back to the Obama regime, this isn't our local field offices. The FBI does great work at the local level. But frankly, some of their credibility has been called into question by these reports that have come out. And I think a second special counsel to look into some of these abuses that we've seen and the serious questions that are raised, I think is well in order to restore the confidence in the FBI that's desperately needed.
Are you surprised, Congressman Scalise, that after we learned that the FBI blew two chances to intervene against Nicholas Cruz, both on that YouTube video posting and on the tip line when he was basically told he was going to blow up a school, that we never, as far as I can tell, we never have seen Christopher Wray, the FBI director, address how this happened, how we're going to prevent this from happening again. Does that concern you in the wake of the Parkland shooting?
It absolutely does, Laura, and I know you and I have talked about this before. One of the passions I have is to find out exactly who had his file. I mean, Cruz said, I'm going to be a professional school shooter. He told people he was going to do that.
Where's Ray?
And the FBI had
Why doesn't he come out?
We need to have true accountability. And I want to know the names of everybody in the FBI who handled that file and made decisions to not pursue him. And ultimately that led to him going out and massacring 17 people. It should have never happened. And the FBI dropped the ball. You saw some problems at local law enforcement as well. That anger me too. But in terms of oversight here, we have oversight over the FBI, and I think we deserve, and the public deserves, to know just why the FBI dropped the ball on this critically important case.
Congressman Steve Scalise, always great having you on. Thank you so much, sir. And we're going to be keeping a close eye on the developments in Austin. We're awaiting a news conference at any moment from law enforcement officials. We'll take you there as soon as it happens. But coming up, one city in California has voted to jettison its state sanctuary policy. The mayor's going to be here to debate his city's decision. Stay tuned.